Welcome to the Vigor Life Podcast, a source of inspiration, lessons, stories, skill sets, mindsets, and strategies to invigorate and expand all areas of your life. Let's go. What's going on? Coach Luka back here with the Vigor Life Podcast, and today we're going to go, well, essentially what I'm going to do is coach you on nutrition. So this is actually a presentation I end up doing for a lot of the new groups that come into Vigor Ground Fitness and Performance that we found that does really well as far as conveying not only information but like motivation to to get people to feel, take action, which obviously is the catalyst to becoming successful with lifestyle changes. Not feeling overwhelmed. But the thing is, like, I'm gonna kind of bounce left and right here because I do think this is foundational, no matter what where you are. And what I mean by that is this. Okay, look, so somebody might look at me and say, well, you're advanced, right? You're advanced with your nutrition, Luka. And while my nutrition I feel is pretty damn good, I can certainly say that, it's pretty foundational and basic. So, what I wanted to talk to you about today, essentially, even though I said, hey, this is a presentation we do for nutrition inside of Vigor Ground with a lot of groups when we have kind of onboarding and things like that, I would say, like, I'm going to talk about the behaviors and habits of people that are lean, healthy, and have high-level physical performance. So if you see somebody in their 40s and 50s, and once again, this doesn't mean if you're in your 20s, in your 30s, it's irrelevant. But when you see somebody like that's in their 40s or their 50s, and they're lean, they look healthy, they're moving healthy, they are healthy, right? They don't just look it, they are. Basically, like, if you ask them and sit down with them and talk to them about, what are the things that they're doing, like where they're at, I would have you consider, and you can test this out, right? That they wouldn't go like, well, listen, so, what I do is I carb cycle, Monday through Sunday. And what I do on Monday and Tuesday is blah, 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 blah. And I make sure I hit my calories specifically. Like, you're not going to get that, unless that person is still, I would say very much involved in physique or bodybuilding competitions or things of that nature. You're not going to have people do that. But what they will do is they'll probably go like, well, for breakfast I do this, and this is my mindset around this, and these are the times where I kind of treat myself, and this is how I work out. There's going to be a certain pattern of behaviors that they do to look and feel that way. Right, and this is essentially kind of like this foundational thought, that we kind of want to convey. Okay, and let's, even though this can go both ways, this can go towards the route of building muscle. It can also go the route of losing fat. What is the pattern? What is the pattern that we see? The pattern we see is, somebody goes on a diet, right? Which tends to be the mindset, right? There's a mindset kind of, I would say, issue there because it is closed-ended, right? Like 30-day detox, 6-week this, 8-week that, 12-week this. So, but they go on a diet, right? They restrict energy intake, and that low energy intake reduces metabolic activity. It just does, right? Science, team science. But from there, the body tries to restore the energy balance with increased appetite, most of the time with increased appetite, right? So what tends to happen is, obviously, the dieter falls off the wagon, as we call it, right? Simply stops dieting once the goal is achieved. So that's the other part of it. So maybe that person does achieve the goal. So let's look at a 12-week, right? Like getting ready for the wedding. Want to lose 25 pounds, right? Restrict calories pretty hard, go from training little to training a lot, 5-6 days a week. A said wedding comes, reach the goal. And kind of then from there, what happens, right? You're like, I reached the goal, we got the wedding, we're going on a trip, so on and so forth. But then this, kind of eating back to where they were. Or even if they're eating better, right? Despite more energy coming in, metabolism may not go up back to the previous baseline, right? So your resting metabolic rate stays lower than before dieting because that's what happens much of the time, right? And then you get that weight regain, often many times heavier than before, right? That rebound. And what happens then is the person ends up going on a diet again. So you can kind of see, you can't see it, but essentially it's like this loop, right? The loop that keeps repeating itself, and we get that a lot, right? So, but remember, like, this starts with a certain type of mindset for, to be in that place. So one of the things that I talk about is, breaking that loop, and first introducing this, hey, this is what really happens. Like, we want to try to avoid that. And from there, I'm a big, once again, I said, I've not only played high level sports and professional sports, but coached, the highest level athletes as well. And, the reality is that nobody, or very few, I'll say, are kind of using super advanced nutritional strategies. And, so most advanced, I would say, nutritional strategies backfire on people. I tend to, in a presentation, like to do a picture of, a gun that's pointing back towards me, right? Like, you're setting yourself up to shoot yourself and fail. And so I really, it's like one of those things in algebra, right? Like, you have to earn something to move on to the next thing. It's like exercise, right? Like, you have to do a great goblet squat before we're going to front squat you. You know what I mean? You have to do a great, goblet and front squat, have great positions and ankle, before we back squat you. And of course, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but the whole point is, like, you have to earn certain things before you move on to the next thing. And it's the same thing here. And the reality is, I don't believe that most people, for the goals that they want to achieve, so from body composition to health and performance, that most people ever really need to move past level one. And so, I'm still a big, like I said, proponent and big fan of precision nutrition, but like levels, right? Level one is foundational. And we're going to touch on some skill sets of level one, and then level 2 and 3, it just push those, right? Meaning that they progress those, okay? And then we'll kind of discuss a little bit of my thought process around even things like macros and calories, which I think are a good approach. Certainly becomes dependent on the individual, where they are and their personal preferences, and whether that's a good fit for them. But, let's go to here, right? Like, I mean, I'm always like, it's not about willpower, it's about skill power. And like white knuckling stuff, that process that I mentioned before is a process of white knuckling, right? Go on a diet, whatever it is. Like, I mean, and I would say I'm highly, trained both, physically, but also, like, I'm good with nutrition. I've done, I've had, like, gone the route of preparing for photo shoots and, going on a, diet, knowing that I'll have a photo shoot and understanding what I'm getting into and so on and so forth. I mean, that's tough. That's very tough for me as a person that is very busy, does a lot throughout the day. Going on any type of diet is certainly, like, challenging, right? Now, of course, you can adapt this. I think there's a I would say an approach for everybody that is the right approach, right? The right approach. But like, if you go and restrict my calories a ton, and I start training, things like, man, I'm gonna have a tough time, right? I'm gonna have to white knuckle through some of this stuff. And the reality is it's not about that willpower. It's about skill power. It's about building skill sets that last for a lifetime, right? And so when I mentioned earlier, notice how I say we a lot, because I'm so used to being like, getting away from the I, but we always talk about Vigor Ground as a we and as a team. But, when I talked earlier about the, meeting two people that you would say, like, hey, man, that's how I want to be. Like, man, you're lean and you're healthy and, you can perform, right? So if you looked at a person that you wanted to be like in that physical realm, and, they would have skill sets. Like, they would have a certain level of skill sets. You talk to them about their day. You talk to them about their habits. And if you started writing them down, you'd see all these patterns. And they may not be the same, because like I said, everybody's an individual. But a lot of these you would see, all right? So these are the skill sets for nutrition success. And I would even say, success in just healthy living lifestyle. And when I go through these, because I'm going to run through them a little bit faster, and then we're going to kind of revisit them. But, you don't have to have all of them. Actually, I'll even I would say, be very, very forthright about some of the ones that I'm not doing well with, for instance, right now. I could definitely improve on, which brings me back to the fact that, like, I'm regularly about, I don't know, at 10, if I'm, if I'm going a little bit more compliant, I'll probably be like 9% body fat, but otherwise I'm 10, 11, somewhere over there, right? But there's a lot of room for me in some of these habits that I'm going to share with you guys to improve on. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that I like neither some professional athlete and certainly not somebody that's trying to make a change and is overwhelmed by a lot of things in life, just by transformation, by this, by that, by the other. They certainly don't need these massive, more advanced, super complex strategies. So, that's a very, very important point to say that like each one of these, I could say, well, how can I make this a little bit better, right? So skill sets for success. Number one, making time. And I cannot put shine enough of a light on this, because without this one, like nothing else happens. I mean, and literally it's just like time to think about it, right? Time to strategize, time to prepare for it. And, because an incredible, like perfect example is like yesterday I'm talking to a client, and there's some frustration going on there. Just life happens and it's like really kind of, well, I got this going on and this going on, that there's just no time. I don't have time, and the reality is that busy is a decision. If we break down the day, everybody has enough time. It's just not enough time for everything, right? But you got to choose what is it that matters to you. And I would say and can have you consider that. Obviously, most people are like, what? I want to feel better. I want to look better. I want to be more confident. I want to be healthier. And so if that's the case, and you laid out your day and started doing, time marks on every 15 to 30 minutes, which I do highly recommend that you do, by the way, right? Make timestamps, even just for a couple of days, timestamps on every 30 minutes of what you're doing throughout the day. You'll get this reality check of like, holy shit, like, I could use 2 hours a week to prepare a bunch of meals. And we'll talk about like even, getting food delivery and things like that. But, you could use that time to prep, and it would reduce a lot of your stress, a lot of your time to travel and go get food, go to the cafe, do this, that, the other, right? Like, but you gotta make time. It's kind of like, would you ever go, I'm too busy for my kids? No, like you'd sound kind of crazy, right? Like, but once again, like, I mean, some people are, but you know what I mean? Like you look at your day and you go like, no, this is non-negotiable, right? And I like that word non-negotiable. Like what is non-negotiable in your life? For people that come and say, hey, listen, like I'm done. Like I'm finally like ready to transform. I'm committed to this. I will ask, like, say, so what are some non-negotiables in your day and in your life? Because that allows us to start working things to their life versus, because of course, you got to make some changes and some sacrifices. But if you try to overhaul somebody's life, and especially, if it's like, oh, well, you know what? I know the kids are important to you, but you're going to have to cut that out. Like, yeah, that's not going to fit, right? But you got to make time. Like for whatever you want to change and improve in your life, you got to make time for it. There's no way around it. Like, and like I said, then busy becomes a decision. I'm constantly both pushing to be more productive and effective on one side, and constantly dreading, looking at and accepting the fact that like I still waste time, right? Because we all have our patterns, and whether it's wasting time, doing work on a computer and kind of getting pulled in by social media, and all of a sudden, there's an hour a day or maybe more, hour and a half. For some people, it's like I said, 3 hours or 4 hours of TV at night. It's whatever. You're going to break it down and you're going to find you have a lot of time, right? You're just making decisions on where you put it. And so making time, it is the foundational one. It is the foundational thing. I mean, like when you start training, you're going to make time to come to the gym to get your training sessions in, right? You're going to have to start making time to even just, write, like for instance, journal, like what you're doing, like what foods you're eating, to bring awareness to your day. Like, it is such a foundational thing. And like I said, this kind of brings it back to kind of these virtues and philosophies of, just time in general being our most valuable asset, and it truly is, and as far as we only have so much time. I mean, listen, nobody knows if they're going to go tomorrow or not. Where are you going to put it? Like, how is the time that you invest going to, does it get you what you want? So if you truly want, and if you truly want to feel better, perform better, look better, have more energy throughout the day, have more confidence, go after the things that you want in life, and you know that your physical being is like stopping you from going there, man, like maybe you want to start reinvesting time and not putting it into, fill in the blank or wherever you're putting it in, and put it into, like I said, food prepping, training, stress reduction, getting more sleep, so on and so forth, stuff that we'll touch on, right? So we spent a little bit of time on that one, but hey, you know why? Because it's very, very important. Number 2 and 3 are eat slowly and stop at 80% full. Like these are just habits that, like, the reality of it is, if you look across the world in the populations that have had success with, health, longevity, maintaining a healthy weight, they all do that, and there's so many different examples from across the world. Is like, I might get this wrong, but it's like, hey, 30 water, 30 food, 40% air, in your stomach. I don't know which specific culture, says that, but like, a lot of places have this, I would say, this healthy mentality. You don't eat till you're stuffed. And like I said, in the US right now, when you're full, you're actually stuffed, right? That's the perspective, is like that. For most people, it's like, oh man, I'm full. Like, you're actually stuffed. Full is feeling like you could still eat some. And of course, it goes in hand with, eating slowly, because the satiety, I would say, for our brain to like really realize satiety, it takes some time. So like, eating for 15 minutes, per meal, and increasing the length of time of your meals is like massively important. And, this is one of those things that, once again, right, this is a skill set. Like I've been fortunate to where I've have this so ingrained, because in Slovenia and Europe, we sit down and eat meals. I never watched TV while I ate until I came to the US. And when I go home, that's still what we do. The TV's not on. We don't watch TV. We're sitting at this big table. When we go out, lunch is longer and stuff like that. And so we eat slower naturally. It's kind of what you're trained to do, because you're conversating, you're engaging. It's a social kind of, I would say, event in many ways too. So, but then you feel fuller, right? Where it's like here, obviously I fell into the hustle and bustle. So sometimes my meal is like, I'm knocking it down in like, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And the thing is, like, time yourself, right? Time yourself on a meal, because it'll kind of give you a slap in the face of like, holy shit, right? And it might not be all the meals. It might be one meal. Like, you might inhale one meal throughout the day, right? And once again, like, that might be fine. Maybe you do that, but you're maintaining your weight, and it's okay, right? That's why I say that, like, none of these are like, oh, you gotta have all of them to be successful. But this is an awareness. This is something that's awareness, because you can start manipulating your habits and choosing which one you want to work on. So, for instance, if you sit down and you go, you start timing your meals, like, holy shit, like every meal in a day takes me less than 5 minutes to eat, right? Man, that's a problem, right? You want to start addressing that and going like, okay, goal, push that to 8 minutes. Push it to 7 minutes. Maybe you want to push it to 10, right? You keep going up. And I'll have you consider that, like, if you just made that change, if you're somebody that eats very fast and you made that change, you will eat less, because you'll feel fuller faster. You'll eat less. And because you eat less, obviously less calories, energy in, energy out, you're going to lose weight, right? So each one of these, and obviously it's also like just healthier for you too, but that's the whole point of this, right? Like, remember, we talk about like that. For me personally, like, if, successful nutrition changes are ones that affect your body composition, so the way that you look, health, the way that you not just feel, but that you are, like I said, whether it's blood work, whether it's, blood pressure, whether it's inflammation, yada, 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 right? Like, all those different things become better. Your blood work picture becomes better. Obviously you're feeling it better. You're getting the effects of that. And then performance, right? So does it help you perform better as far as, conditioning, strength, building muscle, whatever that the variables that you want to work on. So these two like factors, one, they go together, but that's as a habit. You have the 7 habits of highly effective people and managers and stuff. Like, yeah, this is the habits of highly successful, or as to say, highly effective bodies, right? But this is real. Like, these are things that we talk about. And then, like I said, I'll touch in the next couple of minutes of like, how'd you go about it? So next one, eating lean protein with every meal, right? And I'll fly through this a little bit faster because I'm going to touch on the main ones that we coach on at the beginning. But obviously, protein massively important, not just for building lean muscle, but nitrogen ballast for it's a thermogenic food. So when it comes to fat loss, obviously you burn more calories digesting protein than you do carbs or fat. So it's effective there. So a lot of important things. It's a more filling food as well. So if you eat protein, obviously you're going to be fuller faster. Eating at least 5 servings of colorful fruits and veggies every day. I mean, that's kind of like one of those very, very basic ones, but something that is not happening for most Americans. And there's many ways to add that in. We're going to talk about that. Making smart carb choices. Now, once again, like the whole good and bad food, right? We really don't differentiate between that, or should I say we differentiate. There's certainly better foods for your goals, but one of the things that we really teach is like, hey, get to the 80 to 90%. Get all the nutrient dense foods from whole unprocessed food as much as possible. But then the last 10%, 15%. Hey, if you want to have a cookie, a Twinkie, or whatever else that you like, that some would consider a bad food, that's not going to make you more unhealthy. It really isn't. And unless, it's a trigger food. Like I said, if something is a trigger food and, you have that around, that's a different story now. But the reality is like if we can fill and get all the quality nutrients from whole unprocessed foods, 80, 90% of the time, like you're going to be in a really, really good position, right? Because nobody's going to shoot for, like if you shoot for 100, then you feel restricted and it creates a whole nother set of problems, right? So with making smart carb choices, it ends up being like, hey, are you slow, you eating, naturally, I'll say whole unprocessed, carbs that, digest slower, right? That would be a goal. So they're exchanging what you're doing now for those choices, right? So that's what it really comes down to. It doesn't have to be perfect, but we got to move down that continuum. And remember, every single one of these habits, you're somewhere on this continuum, right? So from horribly, horribly bad to like, perfect, right? Everybody's somewhere. And it's like, can we keep moving that down, down that continuum for every single one of these? And maybe, and not even all of them at the same time, but like the ones that you pick and choose. And that's what we're teaching people. Like, hey, look, you choose one or you choose two and you work on them and you make them consistent. And then we move on to the next one. Another habit that's is eating healthy fats. Once again, we're looking at obviously omega-3s, the ratio between the fatty acids and what most Americans take in is we eat a lot more inflammatory I would say fats than anti-inflammatory fats. So switching that up, and there's a lot of benefits, everything from hormonal, obviously, to reducing inflammation, to you name it. But so how do we, once again, shift that and get more things like fish oils and, I would say like the right ratios of polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, saturated fats, but getting more healthier fats into your nutrition. Same thing, once we look at the picture of A and B, hey, where is the client right now? Like we look at the GPS, here's where you are, point A, here's point B. Cool, let's move you down the continuum, right? And I'll talk a little bit about as far as like how that goes, not necessarily having to look at your macros, but going like, okay, well, let's, here's your meal one. All you have in meal, most of meal one is just sugary carbs and, saturated fats and trans fats, right? So how can we switch this up and get healthier fats and get a scramble with, that's cooked in coconut oil and got a little bit of avocado and, veggie scramble, maybe a sweet potato hash or whatever, right? Like throwing out an example there, like how can we make that better? And don't, forget about all the other meals, like how can we make that better? So healthy fats is certainly one of them. Well, one is planning vigor-friendly meals. And what all that is like, we show people a plate, right? So where if you had to have one plate that you follow most of the time, like a quarter of it would be protein, about, a quarter or a little bit less of it would be, healthy carbs, smart carbs, and half of it would be veggies, right? And then you have a little part there that would be like a a thumb or two thumbs worth of fat, right? But people are visual, so showing somebody a plate and giving examples of like, this is what a great plate of food would look like, and these are the foods that would be in there. It's very, very, very helpful, right? Because once again, like most people are visual. And we'll come back to talking about, calories, tracking, things like MyFitnessPal or macros and things of that nature. But, if you give a person like the idea of a plate and taking pictures of a plate, which there's a great app that's called U8, where you can put in, just take pictures of your food, and you take a picture, what time you ate, it asks you even a question, is it in line with your goals, or is it not in line with your goals, right? So it creates this awareness, and you can even write underneath like, hey, I was hungry when I ate this, I was stressed, right? So it's basically a journal, but versus it being, tracking maybe in calories and macros, you're tracking in like basically pictures, right? Like more in a sense of the handful diet, which we'll touch on in a little bit, and also, being awareness of like, hey, is this behavior fitting the goal of my physical goal, right? And what mood was I in? What was happening when I was eating it? So you guys, I've talked about in the past, and this comes from psychology, not just for nutrition, but it's very, very useful. The HALT, and like those are acronyms, right? Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Was I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired when I ate? So the U8 app is a really good app for, like I said, tracking for the client, but also for us to look at it and go like, hey, let me see your day's meals or this week's meals. And then I can ask more questions and dig in on why something happened, right? Or, hey, what happened here? Well, this, but the thing is we can create awareness, we can pinpoint it, and we can start changing it. But so that's why, like, eating vigor-friendly meals is, essentially it helps people create context around what is a vigor-friendly meal and what does it involve, right? And once they understand, like, and like I said, I'm a big fan of going like, showing a meal and going like, is this a vigor-friendly meal? Yes, it is. Okay, why is that a vigor-friendly? Well, because it's got the right amount of protein. So, there are two palmfuls of protein right there for guys, got 2 fistfuls of veggies, and so on and so forth. And it's like, great, right? Like, it's education, but it's also education that leads to integration, right? Because that my big thing is education, or information has to lead to integration, actual action, which leads to transformation, which is the change that people get. Which leads to the next one, which is record what you eat. And like I said, recording what you eat can be done in different ways by choice of the person, like giving people choice of what that is. Journaling just in a paper. In a written journal, or is it in something like MyFitnessPal or any type of calorie tracking software, or is it in another type of format like something like U8 where it's pictures, right? It doesn't, honestly, whatever is better than what they're doing right now is a positive change moving forward, and like that's all we want to promote, right? But once again, most people that are successful are in some way aware and tracking it. Like you may get to a point in time, like I don't, track my foods, but I can look at a meal and like, no, okay, this is fitting my day. Or once you're, experienced enough, you can go like, man, I only had one meal and a really small snack. So my evening meal, I can eat a lot more, but I still want these breakdowns, right? Like, once again, for somebody that's just starting their journey, you want them to have tracking, because in some format or another, like I say, I think when I say tracking, people instantly go like, oh man, like calories. I hate doing that, right? But even just going to, that format of, what we teach from Precision Nutrition, which is the handful diet, and that's like, palm of protein. Like I said, it's fist of carbs, this is fat, and they can look at it and go like, oh, okay, cool, right? It's a tool. And like I said, if you are in coaching, you want to be able to you want to be able to see what's actually going on, versus, humans in general are just not good at remembering things, or it was about this much, right? So I'm always, the magic question, and Pina is like, hey, let me see, right? And this works for anything, right? Like if you have a business, if you have anything that where you gotta track and keep somebody accountable to something. Oh yeah, I did do that. Okay, cool. Let me see. Right? Automatically, it's like now it's got to be shown. Yeah, I got that blog post written. Okay, cool. Let me see. I think it's enough words. Let me see. Right? Like that way we can address it, and you actually know where you're at. Like that's the key. Like always. Like what do we, point A to point B, GPS. I keep talking about that, but like knowing where you're at. Same thing with performance, right? Like know where you're at. Like, am I, I want to broad jump this. I want to 40-yard dash this. I want to, right? Like, okay, cool. Let's test it. Let's see where you're at, right? So that's important. Creating and using sleep rituals. Like, so obviously there's, a podcast that I shot that's literally an hour plus all around sleep, how important it is, why it's important, actual strategies and tactics on how to improve your sleep. And I'll put the link to that one in the notes section. This is a massive one, drinking only calorie-free beverages. So, whether that means going from regular Coke to Diet Coke, still a fantastic, step. But once again, like, if I'm not mistaken, I think the average is about 440 calories per day is what most Americans drink. They drink 440 calories per day. I know it's somewhere between there and 500. So, if you think of somebody that should be eating, or for maintenance around 2,000, or maybe somebody is at 1,500, that's 25 to 33% almost of your calories are being drank, right? So, and most of those are coming from sugary drinks. So, think about that and how big of a change. Like that's a massive change that we see. Apart from obviously water being very important for hydration, but having people switch to that is, we're always seeing positive results in weight drop and people feeling better. But that's one actually of the key habits that we'll talk about a little bit later. Using targeted recovery strategies. I mean, with stress levels, like one of the next podcasts that is going to be about basically, the anti-stress brain, but really like kind of strategies around reducing stress and being more resilient to stress throughout the day, because it is such an important factor. And I'm going to touch on it in a little bit about how, Americans specifically train a lot and they're very active compared to other countries in the world that have much lower obesity. And, an example of that is that Japan has 4% obesity. America has like 33% obesity. And, Japanese culture is actually very inactive. And we're going to touch on that, like why that matters. But a massive factor in just your, I would say, quality of life. And also eating, because man, like much of the eating that happens is driven by emotions and stress. So, being able to be less stressed is so much more powerful, not just for like the quality of relationships, the quality of your work, all these different things, which I'll actually, touch on in a bit. Actually, let me pop over here, because this is, you're think about it this way, right? Stress, because this is like the think about the amygdala, but something to learn about the whole stress situation, right? Problems are inevitable, right? Stress is just a part of daily life. I mean, you don't want life without stress. Stress is good, right? Stress helps us grow. But knowing how to quickly turn from like rumination, thinking about stuff that continues to go wrong, to problem solving, will give you a competitive edge in like whatever area of life that is, but with nutrition, certainly so. So, in business and life, you must learn how to differentiate between actual danger and perceived danger. So without the skill, you're susceptible to outside stimuli. And like, that's what stress really does, right? Like it tricks our amygdala saying like, oh, something's really, really dangerous. So your physical and cognitive health depends on this. And studies show that stress leads to countless physical ailments, which will diminish your ability to perform optimally. And also, tons of studies show that they lead to a lot of stress leads to overeating, to under recovery, to things of that nature. So, using targeted recovery strategies have so many implications in just the quality of your life that we could go on and on and on about that. But the reason I bring it up is because when you say stuff like that, sometimes, without creating context around it and without showing the specific individual and how that will help them achieve their goal, it's really easy to just go like, that's not what I need. I need you to make me a meal plan, and I need this, and I need to work out hard. And right, like this is why information is important, or should I say not information, but education, and attaching that education to a person's goals, right? And like I said, when I do the seminar, it's very, like I said, hands-on-ish, and I'll ask a lot of questions so that we get to the point of like how this specific thing will help that person, lose weight, get out of joint pain, be able to have more energy for their kids when they come home. Like you got to connect it to the goal that has gravity for them, right? After that, it's eating whole foods only. I mean, that's just one of the things we like to teach as soon as possible is to replace, I'd say processed foods for unprocessed whole foods. And that doesn't mean 100% shift, but it does mean starting to change that. And that can obviously not only creates more nutrients, like more nutrient density in people's diets, but it also, it's like more nutrients, less calories, more filling, and just in general improves health. One of the habits also is a little better, which means we're just trying to improve, right? And think about this. In essence, like I started with talking about this whole diet process and that cycle of, dropping calories and then regaining the weight, right? It's certainly not under the mentality of a little bit more and a little bit better, right? It's actually the mentality of like a lot more fast. And that's where most people fall off, get overwhelmed, think that, there's something wrong with them, that they just weren't meant to lose weight, that it's genetic, that whatever else it may be. But it's not. A little more, a little better is literally like looking at it and being able to look at your wins. And we've talked about also, being able to look at your wins and why tracking is important. Tracking behaviors versus outcomes, right? Being able to tick off, hey, I went to the gym 4 times this week. Last week I only went 2 times. Great job, right? Guess what? That's more. That's better, right? Hey, you know what? I noticed that I, this week, 5 out of the 7 days, I got enough of my water in, where last week I only got 2 days in. Better, right? That's your win. Celebrate your win. Feel confident. Build that up. And that's what a little more, a little better means. You look back and you go like, yeah, it wasn't perfect, but look at that. Like I improved. Awesome, great job. Like, man, let's build that confidence. Let's show you that you're winning. And if it's 1% better, I mean, this is it sounds foo-foo to people. I know you've heard it before, but hey, the reality is like 1% better 365 days a year, that's like improving, more than threefold. And like, that's massive, right? I mean, if you looked at profits like that, you'd be like, holy shit. So, I mean, even like, I look at it like, 1% better every week is 52% better. That's a huge difference. And then from there is like a combination of another habit is, protein and colorful veggies and fruits. But, once you can combine those two, like, hey, if you have enough protein on your plate and, the other half of your plate is veggies and whatever else you add to it, like you're going to be in a pretty good place, right? And last but not least is like changing your environment. And that one actually, is so massively important. I do think it's one of the fastest, fastest ways to change your behaviors. It's changing your environment. Like I said, we've done whole shows on that. Great book to read, Willpower Doesn't Work, that talks about that. How like we can choose our environments, and then our environments shape our behaviors. And we have a lot more control in choosing our environments than what we think. And like I said, our environment is everything. I mean, it's from stuff that you read, from what you listen to. If you're watching this podcast, like this is environment, right? It's who you surround yourself with, is in the positions that you put yourself in, the sights, the sounds, the smells, like you name it, right? And so know that you have a lot of power in shifting your environments. Like I said, instead of going to the cafeteria of your company, going to the cafe, 5-minute walk down the street. Now you're getting a walk. Now you're getting some fresh air, and you're going to a better place, right? You change your environment. That's your choice, right? So on and so forth. Like same thing. Like you get up in the morning. Do you, do you watch the news, or do you put on a quality podcast, or read 15 minutes of a book that inspires you, motivates you, shifts your perspective to one that's helping you shift your behaviors, right? Those are all very, very important. Now, coming back to, because I always share this example, and I say, well, you must be thinking, like, so I talk to the audience, say, hey, look, you must be thinking like, well, how can like these habits like really do anything for me? Like without, if I don't just focus on like completely changing my food and my meal plan and so on and so forth. So I like to give this study that was done where basically there was two groups and it was a 120-day study. And one group basically was kind of like the group that was just eat the same way that you have been eating, right? Eat everything the same that you have. And in with group two, they just said, okay, look, 4 meals a day, you got to eat 30 to 40 grams of protein. I think it was 30, if I'm not mistaken. So like 30 grams of protein, I think, at every meal, 4 meals a day. Everything else, you can do whatever whatever you want. Like you can drink whatever you want. You can, you can continue to eat whatever you want. Like that's basically your only parameter, right? Add protein to every meal. And over the course of, those 120 days, there was the group that ate kind of like the same that they did pretty much stayed the same. It was like minimal. I think there was minimal weight loss. And I'm sure partially, obviously, because you make some more conscious choices if you're in a study. But the group that just added 30 grams of protein to every meal, first of all, on average, right, was eating 441 calories per day less, right? That one habit that we talked about over a course of 120 days dropped 441 calories per day. And that's obviously because when you eat protein, you feel more full, right? And it was obviously other effects here, but the whole point of it is like that one shift did that. And the average weight loss, I'm actually looking at the study in the chart right here, was down, I think, over 11 pounds, close to 12 pounds. Now, so remember, this is, these participants aren't asked to train, to exercise, do any cardio, nothing, right? There was that one variable over the course of 120 days that, helped them drop, like I said, it looks 567, actually 6 kilos more than that. So it's like, I think 12 or 13 pounds right there, right? So, I mean, that's pretty significant. Like, one shift, no training, no nothing, just adding that one variable. And, when I show that study, a lot of people are like, wow, that's a pretty significant shift for like just doing one thing for the 120 days and nothing else. And you were basically told like you can do whatever else with your nutrition, right? So that's why those habits are powerful. And they're not, that it's not moving because a person will go like, well, that's moving slowly. But it's like, no. It's moving strategically, right? Strategically. And, you see the same thing with nutrition as you would in business. If somebody comes in, you're just starting, your business, and imagine a consultant comes in and goes like, all right, listen, so we got to do all of this. You got to start a YouTube channel. You got to start doing on Facebook. You got to do Facebook ads. Have you done Facebook ads before? No, you got to go in there and do this, and that. Like you got to write a book though. You got to write a book. You got to speak locally. You got to do blah, 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 right? And you're just like, holy shit. I mean, first of all, if you don't get completely overwhelmed and like lose your mind, and you actually try doing all of that, it means that you're putting a little bit of effort into all these things and you don't really do well at anything, right? You fail. And then because you fail, you go like, shit, none of this stuff works, which is not true, right? But if I took like all that energy and focused it into that one thing and go like, okay, look, here's the habit. Like this is, the lowest hanging fruit, or maybe either eat the frog, which we'll talk about in a little bit. This is what I'm going to attack. And here's the strategies that we're going to employ to move this style forward. Then all of a sudden, right, you're like, holy shit, I'm putting all this energy into this one arrow, right? Boom, we built that up. Okay, cool, now let's add this, right? And it's the same approach, right? It's the same approach. Now, let's look at some samples here, right? So imagine, because I just want to throw like how this usually works, right? How it works, because you want an actionable step, right? If you go like eat more protein with every meal, some people go like, well, what does that look like, right? But for instance, most people have some of these limiting factors. I'm not going to go, through all of them, but just give you an idea. Like eating too many processed foods and not enough nutritious, minimally processed food. Like that's a limiting factor for a lot of people, right? Not meeting basic nutrient needs. Right, so not getting enough of, like for instance, omega-3 fatty acids, not getting enough protein, not getting enough water, not getting enough vitamin D, magnesium, whatever it may be. Right, getting dehydrated, that's a limiting factor. Drinking too many sugary sweetened drinks, that's a limiting factor. Not feeling satisfied by your meals, and you know what I'm talking about, right? Like when you eat a meal and you're like, okay, I need to keep eating, right? Eating too quickly and while distracted. That's massive. The mindfulness, we talked about this, when people watch TV or watch a movie, I've talked about this study before where like you're eating way more because you're distracted and you don't feel those hunger signals. And so that's a big one, right? That's certainly a limiting factor. Irregular eating habits for some can be a limiting factor, right? Even like, so it's fine if you eat 2 or 3 times a day versus 6 or 7, whichever one you prefer. But like irregular eating habits usually mean that you're going to overeat, right? Because it's like, oh, I'm super hungry, you might binge, and so on and so forth. Overeating, using food to manage feelings, that's a limiting factor. Not getting enough sleep is a limiting factor. Not getting enough recovery, basic food prep skills, certainly a limiting factor, right? Because now you're at the mercy of either eating out all the time or, ordering food delivery, which is a good option in many cases, right? Basic shopping and food awareness, right? Being able to learn how to read labels versus going like, oh, this says it's healthy and it's low fat and, but really not understanding the food labels is a limiting factor. Making impulsive choices, feeling too busy, too rushed, not having convenient options, okay? Not being consistent, limiting factor. Maybe you do well for a little bit. So I'm gonna float back and go, if you, for instance, take an example of like eating too many processed foods and not enough minimally processed foods, you'd need help with replacing processed foods with whole, minimally processed foods like fruits and veggies. What's a sample habit? Like, find 2 whole food substitutes that you eat right now and change them up. So instead of drinking orange juice, eat oranges, right? If you ate oranges instead of drinking orange juice, guess what? Like your calories are going to go down. You're going to drink less sugar because, what's orange juice? It's concentrated. You're squeezing all the juice out of the oranges with the sugar and everything else, but it's higher calorically. It's not going to fill you up as much because the orange has fiber, right? So you're eating less calories. More fiber is going to be more filling, but you could eat a lot more oranges to get the same amount than you do in orange juice, right? And you could do the same thing as like, instead of eating, I don't know, like a breaded, crispy zucchini, right? You exchange it with, but I guess that's a real food. But I would say like legitimately processed stuff, like, French fries versus, yams, right? Like, think of like the foods that you're currently eating like that you can switch up, okay? Because that's a sample habit, and you can actually determine it in, having a nutrition consultation with somebody, and they pick the things that they want and switch them up and that they like them, and let's go, right? So that's for instance a sample one. Like if you're drinking too many sugary drinks, exploring you'll need help with exploring better quality drink options. So going from, like I said, I'm not when people go like, oh well, they're drinking Coke Zero instead of Coke. It's like, oh man, that stuff is horrible for you. And it's like, well, no, they went from drinking I don't know how many calories to just drinking 0 calories. That's better. And we said a little better, right? So that's better for sure. And so, think about that. Like that is an option. Eating too quickly and while distracted, slowing down and focusing. What's one? Well, add 5 minutes to each meal. Put your fork down every time you take a bite. There's a number of different tactical things that you can do, right? If you have regular eating habits, you need to create a more balanced schedule. Eat 3 to 4 meals a day, or have them be mapped out and planned at certain times. Notice how every limiting factor has something you need help with, but then it has sample habits that you can go along with that, right? So basic food prep skills, learning to cook and prepare food. There's a really good, Nate talks about this, like a 3-2-1, like having 3 simple options for breakfast, 2 for lunch, 1 for dinner. And you could flip that around. Like if you like dinner more, 1, 2, 3, or 2, 2, 3. Like there's a lot of different ways to do it. But, you learn how to do some really basic stuff that you really enjoy eating, right? And you just focus on those. You don't have to become, chef extraordinaire, but you got to start somewhere, right? So essentially, what ends up happening is like there's a number of ways to do this, but every month, like, when you break down your ultimate goal, and your ultimate goal might be, hey, I want to build muscle, but I want to get leaner. So I got like 50 pounds to lose, but I'd love to put on some muscle and strength because I want to get back to playing sports and doing it, right? So, I want my joints to feel healthier and so on and so forth, right? And you have this goal, like you have this outcome that you want to achieve. And then you break that goal down into different habits that you got to change, right? And one of them will probably be like, hey, working out, doing strength training 3 days a week, right? And so you put those skills down, like things that you want to develop. And, there is no golden rule, but like every 2 to 3 weeks, you want to build a habit, right? And once you've become pretty consistent with that habit, you add on another one. What's cool is that certain habits are keystone habits. So like you'll do one and others come along for the ride, right? You wake up in the morning and, you train early in the morning. Like for instance, you come to Vigor Ground, team training boot camp, you train. And because you train, like afterwards, you have a healthy meal because you're automatically like, man, I just got a great workout in. Let me nourish my body with healthy food. Boom, keystone habit. So now you're training, but you knocked out breakfast and made it better already without even making that one of your goals. You see what I mean? And so that's where like this stuff really becomes, I would say, beneficial. So from there, you keep stacking these habits, right? And you kind of reverse engineer. The thing is, they might not all be the same, meaning that like might not all be the same. From a standpoint of some person might start with like, I'm going to add more protein to every meal and drink more water. Some people are like, I am going to go with the mindful eating because that's like really affecting me. And I feel like that's the one I want to attack first. So, you kind of do a behavior map, right? So we do a behavior map. Okay, cool. What do I want to do? I want to build muscle. All right, I want to build muscle. So what are the behaviors? Let's list the top, 3-4 behaviors you got to start working on to build muscle. And like, this is not like coming from me. This is a choice that the person will make. So the questions under the behaviors will be like, hey, what does it involve? Why does that matter? How will I know if I've done it? And what will tell me it's time to move on, right? So behavior 1, workout. For instance, I want to build muscle. Okay, behavior 1, I got to start working out. What does it involve? Train 3 times a week and follow a specific workout plan. Why does it matter? Well, regular workouts stimulate muscle growth and improve strength. Makes sense. How will I know if I've done it? I'll have completed my workout journal for the day. If you have a coach, obviously that's a very simple one because they keep you accountable. Like, hey, did you make it in 3 times a week, right, this week? But if not, like, hey, did you fill out your workout journal because you trained and ticked that off on a checklist? Okay, so what will tell me it's time to move on? Well, I'll have done 3 workouts per week consistently for 2 weeks. I'll be planning and prepping for my workouts with a calendar and system. So I'll have some strategy. I'll have things to follow. I'll have done it for 2 weeks. Then I'm going to go move to my second behavior, which is adding one nutrient-rich, high quality meal. So what's that going to be? Well, what does it involve? A super shake, right? Super shakes are really easy. Like you blend it up 2, 3, 4 minutes and it's done. So it doesn't take a lot of time and effort. So why does it matter? Well, it gives me lean protein, fruits, veggies, and healthy fats conveniently, right? Conveniently. How will I know if I've done it? Well, I'll have made it and drank a super shake every day. I'll tick it off of my consistency journal. So if you're using a journal, like I said, if you're using app, whatever it may be, and how will I know it's time to move on? Well, I'll get 90% or 80, you determine, but it's got to be at least 80, like 80 to 90% of the time, I got my super shake in those 2 weeks. So 2 weeks, 14 days. What's 90% of 14 shakes? Is about 12. So if 12 out of 14, you knocked out a shake, okay, cool. You have enough consistency to be able to move on to the next one, which might be behavior 3, adding lean protein to every meal because protein is so more important in building muscle, right? So you can see how like the process of how we go through this, right? Somebody gets consistent with training, and maybe people are like, for instance, right? Like imagine that somebody comes in to train and right afterwards, they go to Fit Bar and they get their post-workout smoothie, like the super shake, right? We get a super shake there, and they stack that habit, so they connect it. Now, all of a sudden, they're doing 2 habits at the same time, but it's really easy because they're stacking them, right? Like, but notice how, like, this is how we want to approach this, where we build lifestyle-based habits that people do. So it takes education, integration, which helps them transform. But it seems seemingly like I said, because most people go like, no, like give me the detox, give me the meal plan, give me the thing, let me go, right? And it's just not how behavior change works. And so, think about it this way, that like, I talked about habit stacking, right? Stacking habits. And habit stacking, kind of our level 1 when we do challenges, like these are the ones that we like to promote a little bit more. But once again, like, we're always like, hey, it doesn't have to be these, but this is what we found. Focusing on eating till you're 80% full. But the big kicker one is adding the protein to every meal. I really like we've seen really good results with that, right? And if you're, if a person likes tracking calories and macros and stuff like that, we're like, cool, all right, make sure that every one of your meals has, for most people, 30 to 40 grams of protein. Right, so they can track that. I'm like, hey, don't worry about the other stuff. Just make sure every meal gets that. Now, if some people, like to have meals and snacks, they will be like, cool, make sure your snacks have about 10 to 20 grams of protein in them, depending on how big the person is, what they're trying to achieve. But then, that's easy for them to track. So if they're tracking an app, great. If they're tracking handful style, they'll know, like, okay, cool, 1 palm or 2 palms of protein, right? If they're able to read labels, same thing. So this becomes a habit that we really work on, is mindful eating, but then adding protein to every meal. Doing a half a plate of veggies is another big one. And the thing is, maybe you're not going to get to half a plate of veggies right away. That's cool. Are we moving that dial right along? And then what are some tactics and strategies? Like, I'm a big fan of, obviously, athletic greens, which gets you 7 to 8 servings of greens, essentially veggies and fruits. And it's got obviously it's got 75 different superfoods in there, and probiotics, and it's like seriously the best. Honestly, that's my health insurance. Period. But that's something that helps people out. Putting veggies and fruit into a blender with a super shake, that's another convenient strategy of getting that in. And then just looking at your plate and going like, hey, do I have more veggies? And like I said, being able to pick what they like. Hey, grilled asparagus, charred Brussels sprouts. And we show them like this really cool graphic where you look at like, okay, I'm like, you want to eat as much. I mean, I would never give you a restriction on fruits and veggies, but 1 cup of zucchini, 20 calories, 1 cup of kale, 5 calories, 1 cup of Brussels sprouts, 38 calories, a cup of broccoli, 31, baby spinach, 7, asparagus, 27, mushrooms, 15 calories, cauliflower, 27 calories, celery, radish, 18 calories. So basically it's like, look, you could smash 300 calories of veggies and be so stuffed that it's nuts, and you could eat a cookie that's 400 calories, right? But that's where, it's making a point like, man, how do we add more of this? You're actually going to feel like you're eating more food, because you will be, but it's going to be nutritiously dense, but not calorically dense, right? And then giving them the, I would say the different options, like, hey, look, I know it's hard for people to add veggies, so here's some ways to sneak it in. Replacing snack foods with fruit. There was a study done that, I'm trying to find the study right now. Fruit obviously higher in fibers and micros and lower in calories, can satisfy sweet cravings and curb cravings. But a Syracuse study showed they could predict someone's body weight based on the food they had sitting on their countertops. And they saw that people that had basically fruit, were able to, were leaner, were healthier. Right, so that's obviously a massive one. So if we look, if we fly through it, and we go at those habit stacks, like obviously protein, it regulates blood sugar, it helps you, keep lean body mass, increases satiety, has a higher thermic effect of food. For women, 6 to 8 palm-sized servings of protein per day. I'm sorry, for men. For women, 4 to 6, right? And if you're tracking in grams, it's 0.75 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if you're 150 pounds, that would be 113, 150 grams of protein per day, right? So that's one of our main, obviously, habits, like habit stacks. Eating to 80% full versus stuffed. Slow down the pace of eating, timer, putting the fork down. Eating away from distractions, television, work, computer. Are you working and eating at the same time? Becoming aware of hunger and fullness cues. Being aware of halt. We talked about that. If the goal is fat loss, then feeling a little hungry is okay. I'm being aware of that, right? You shouldn't always feel full. You should feel a little hungry. Taking 15 minutes to eat a meal. Eating a half a plate of veggies at every meal, right? We talked about that. It has vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, water, fiber to help fill you up during the meal. Stay full between meals and keep you healthy and recover from workouts. Same thing, 6 to 8 fist-sized servings for active men, 4 to 6 fist-sized servings for active women. Doesn't need to be perfect, but do more than you are right now. 0-calorie beverages. Water transports nutrients, oxygen, dissolving, cleaning, reacting, padding, regulating temperature. So it's all the things we need to live. But also, yep, I was right last time I said it makes you feel fuller, but also like, 400 calories per day on average is drank in America. So, and we also saw a study that when you drink 500 milliliters of water before you eat, over the course of 12 weeks, people lost 4 times more body fat than the ones that didn't, right? All other factors being the same. And also that your metabolism increases 24 more percent, burns 24 more calories 60 minutes after drinking 500 milliliters of water. So all these, super positive benefits that are big. And so man, like we just covered a good amount. And like, as always, when it comes to nutrition, I tend to go into the coaching nuances and stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a kind of part 2 of this, because I do want to build on this and continue on this and go in a little more strategic areas. But the key part of it is the fact, like the mindset behind, building skill sets and, skill power versus willpower, and how each one of those can be addressed to build. And once again, because what we're going to do in part 2 is also, where do the macros fit in? Where do the calories fit in? Where do, there's a lot of different approaches to do this. And it's literally kind of like, choose your own adventure that's going to help you win. But this is a great foundation. It's a great foundation, like, the highly effective habits of physically, I would say, healthy, good, I would say lean, and well-performing people. I'd probably work on that headline if I was going to do the book, but you kind of get the point of that, right? Like, I think it's, getting that point across. So like how you're stacking your habits and building your habits is massively important. And then you can plug all these different variances in, like where some people go, hey, calorically, it's the thing to do, it's macros or what may be it. But like the point of it is all of that can be plugged in. So that's going to be part 1. I'm going to hit you guys back with part 2. So stay tuned for it. We'll be back with it. Coach Luka's out. Peace.